Alright, so welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful and exciting tutorial, we're trying to work with a very powerful library called Snorkel. Right? So Snorkel is a powerful library that allows you to be able to do some interesting stuff. So let's say you are trying to work with a project and your dataset is not labeled, right? So what you mostly do is that you give your dataset that is not labeled to a human being who is going to sit down and then label them one after the other. But with Snorkel, you can be able to simplify that particular process, right? So you can just give that particular task of labeling it by a human being to Snorkel. So the basic workflow is that with Snorkel, you can label your dataset that is unlabeled. You can do data augmentation using the transformation function to make your dataset more robust, to be able to build cool features. You can also do slice dataset subset selection, in which you can select the most important aspect of your data that you can use to build your models, right? So that is the main features of Snorkel. So with Snorkel, it allows your work to be very, very easy in case you want to build model from the data-centric perspective. So let's see what the basic workflow. So by default, if I have an unlabeled dataset, I give it to a human being, and a human being will sit down and do it one after the other, and then produce a labeled dataset. But with Snorkel, you can automate it. You can make it very simple. So that's what we're trying to do. So it's the first thing that the human being would have used some heuristics or some metrics or some patterns. So we'll be using them as a function, labeling function. Then we're going to use a pandas apply to apply all these functions to our dataset to produce a label matrix. Then you will evaluate it to see how performant that those particular labels are. Then you will apply and build a model that we use to predict or label the unlabeled dataset to produce a labeled dataset. So let's see how to work with it from scratch, right? So this is a basic workflow. So with Snorkel, we automate all of these steps. So I'll just go back again to my workspace. We are using Colab for now, and then we'll start working on it. So in case you don't have Snorkel on your system and you want to install it, just go with pip install Snorkel, right? So let's start with it. So we'll be trying to work with the first one, the labeling functions, to be able to label an unlabeled dataset. That is going to be our task. So I have some datasets here, which consists of some very cool questions and then some questions about programming and then some basic statements. So let's see how to label these particular ones, right? It's not labeled, so we want to be using Snorkel to label this dataset. Perfect. So it's connected. So let's load my EDA packages. So load our EDA packages as always. So we'll be using pandas to import pandas as PD, and then also be importing random, right? Random to help us with that. We are not using NumPy for now. Okay. Perfect. That is a basic understanding of what we're trying to do. Perfect. Now we want to be able to convert this entire stuff into a dataset. So let's see how to do that. But it is arranged in such a way that our task now, let's specify our task. Our task now is to be able to, this is going to be our task that we want to do. Right. Our task is to be able to label the dataset, right? We want to label the dataset as, let's say, as a question, whether it's a question or it's a code. Right. So this is the basic stuff you're trying to do, right? So you want to label the dataset whether it's a question or not a question. And as you already know, most questions, for the pattern for questions, it's like most questions are start with the 5 W's, right? And then also H, how, right? So the 5 W's can be, as you already know, can be why, when, where, who, which, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and also have how. So these are some of the basic ways we can ask questions, right? You can actually use this one. You can also use question mark as also another way of knowing whether something is a question, right? So this is how human beings answer questions. So using this particular pattern that we have, these heuristics, to be able to determine from this our list which of them is a question and which of them is not a question. So if I go back and I check this data that I have, if I check it out, you can see that it has been arranged here, but not all of them have been arranged well, right? So you can see that from all of these things, all of these are questions, but some of them are not questions. First solve the problem, then write the code, right? So that is a simple code, very, very interesting. Ruby is rubbish, PHP is fantastic, very interesting code. So let's see how to reshuffle this and then create a dataset from it, and then you try and build our dataset, a label dataset. So first off, I'm going to reshuffle or shuffle dataset. I can't spell. How do you do that? So you're using random to help us with that. So random dot shuffle, a sample shuffle. I'm going to pass in my data, right? If I pass in the data set, it's going to shuffle them. And now if I check it back again, it is rearranged in a different format, right? As you can see from here. Hope you can see it well, right? It's going to reshuffle them perfectly for us. Okay, now it has changed the format. Now I'm going to convert this entire stuff into a data set or into a data frame. So you convert to data frame. Apologies for the noise you may be hearing behind. It's going to be df then pd.data frame. I'm going to paste in here because of sentences. Then this is going to be my data, right? So this is going to create a data set for us. So if I check it out, you can see that it's now in a very simple data set. As you can see, so we have the sentences and then we don't have the label, right? There are no labels. So our task is to be able to create functions to be used to label our unlabeled dataset to produce a label dataset. So I'll go back again to where I'm working, and then from here let's create our training and testing. So let's go to train and then test, right? So let's use scikit-learn. So from sklearn.model selection, import train test plate. We want to use train test plate to be able to split our dataset. So let's go to my df train and then my df test, right? Just to have some dataset that we can train with. Then train test plate. So we have my train test plate. Now pass in my dataset, which is the df. Then I'm going to specify the train size, right? So for this train, so train, yeah, we can give it 0.5. I hope it's correct. So we just picking from this, right? So we have splitted it. So let's check it out. If I check the basic shape of the entire data set we have, it's going to be, let's print the shape. So df.shape, apologies for the noise we hear behind, and print, then df train.shape, right? If I check it out, you can see the difference, right? So the basic one is 88 and this is 44 because we split it by 50%, right? We just want to label them. Okay, perfect. Now let's go back again and see what you can do from here. So we have prepared our dataset. Now we want to move on to this particular option. So we need to define our labeling function. So labeling functions, right? So in case you don't have Snorkel, you can just go to install it with this option. So pip install Snorkel. I'm using Colab, that is why I'm going with this question mark here. Okay, so let's check it out. Just install it on our system. So the next thing with that, the first step is that we need to be able to define our label function. So define our labeling functions, right? So the labeling functions are very important to help us with our labeling. That's the thing. The first thing we're doing, so I'm going to import it from snorkel dot labeling function, right? So from label, we just import our label function. So there are two options. We have the label function with small letter, this option here, and then we also have the pandas apply. So pandas lf applier. Then we also need to do some analysis. Right, so these are the most important one as we have inside our diagram. So we need a labeling function to help us with our labeling. We have the pandas lf applier to apply our functions to the entire data set, and then we also have the lf analysis to do our evaluation. So let's go back again. I'm going to import them and let's create our function. So there are several methods of ways of creating the functions. So can spell ways to create the function, to create functions, right? The functions, the first of the ways can be that you can use keyword, right? Lookup. you can also use, let's say, a pattern lookup, right, using maybe regular expression. You can also use, let's say, third-party models, so third-party libraries or libraries like Spacey, right, to also help you with that, and then the rest, right. So these are the etc. So these are the most important ways you can use to create a labeling function, right. We'll be trying to see how to use these three approach that we have to be able to do our tasks, right. So let's paste here. Okay, now let's start with it. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is the keyword approach. So we already know this keyword lookup. As we stated earlier on, if you want a human being to identify if something is a question or not, we already stated that there are some pattern that we use to know if something is a question or not. And the pattern we know is that we can use the 5 W's, that is why, when the question has why, when, where, who, which is a question, right? Or cyber how is also a question, or cyber a question mark. So this is a pattern we use to know if a sentence is a question. So I just go back again. I'm going to create a function to help us identify that. So let's start with the first one. So this is going to be the first function. So I'm going to call it as, let's say, my decorator. So label function. So this labeling function is coming from the one we imported from here, right? It's a decorator, right? And then I'm going to define my function. So df, let's call this lf for labeling function. Then I want to call it as, let's say, keyword lookup. Right. So we're going to look up for the word. Now passing my s. So the s is going to be the series from the data set. Then I'm going to specify my keywords. So I have my keywords here. So let's give all the keywords that we'll be working on. So we have words like, you can give it as a list like this. So we have why, we have what, we have when, we have who, we have where, right? So these are the three main questions that we have, right, that we can use to help us know that this is a question or not. So let's add why to it, how to it too. This is how. Perfect. Now let's write a question. So before we specify, we need to specify some constant for our labels. So this is going to be the constant for our labels. So constant for our labels, right? So the first one that we want to, if something is a question, we want to give it a number of 0. So this of 1 if it's a question, right? If it's a quote, you want to give it as 0, and if it is none of them, abstain. Abstain is important. I'm going to give it as -1, right? So these are going to be our constant to be using, right, for the labels. And I'll just come down here. I'm going to say that, okay, you can just go with this option. So let's say return question. Return a question. If there are several ways you can do that, but let's go with the simplest format. You can look through them. So if our word, let's use the simplest approach, right? Yes, so it's going to be my question. So if any of these words, so if any of these words in my sentence, so we have these sentences. So these sentences here is coming from our pandas function here, right? df.head. The column name was called sentences. This is what we are putting. This is what we are putting here. So I'm going to loop through them. So if any of these words inside our sentence column, right, let's put it to lowercase, is found within our keywords. So for word in my keywords, so simple like this, for word in keywords, right, for this, if any of these words are found within our sentence, I want you to return the word question. Else, if you don't find any of them, abstain, right? So this is going to be the second option. So we have quote 0, question 1, and an abstain, right? That is a simple way of creating a simple function. So that's going to be our first question, right? So it's giving us an error, so let's fix it here. Yep, the creator is missing something. So let's fix it. Right, because it's the creator. Perfect. We are done with it. We are done with our first lookup function. Let's create another one. So I'm going to create another lookup function. It's going to be method 2. So keyword lookup. This one was keyword lookup. Let's use a pattern lookup, right? Pattern lookup or regular expression. So regex function. So you can also use regular expression to help us with that. So let's go with the same thing. So labeling function that we have. I'm going to define the function. So lf dot regex contains. We want to see if the word contains what, right? So I'll pass in there. Yeah, just using just one, right? And I'm just going to go the same way. So let's go return question. If r dot search, we want to search for the word. Let's say r contains what, right? And then anything. So what, and then any what, and then any question mark. So this can also be anything that is having this particular pattern. What, anywhere there, then followed by a question mark or ending by a question mark, can also be specified as a question, right? Dot sentence. Then let's specify the flag r dot I. So I have to import regular expression. So import array, right? Yep. So that is something very simple. Else abstain. So else abstain. So this is another way you can also create another function, right? So we have two functions. We have one which is using keyword lookup, the one using a regular expression. So I'll go back again and we move on to the next step. So the next step on our stuff after creating the functions is to use the pandas lf apply. So I'll go back here. This is apply functions, right? Apologies for the noise you're hearing behind. LFS. I'm just going to go back again and I'll put inside a list. So this is going to be my LF for my keyword lookup and then LF for my regular expression, right? So we have two different functions there. Then I'm going to specify the applier. So the applier, which is going to be my pandas apply. I'm going to pass in my LFS, my functions, my labeling functions. Then the next one is that I'm going to specify my matrix. So let's call this L train. This is this step. So we are finished with this. We are finished with this. We are trying to create this label matrix. So this. Then I'm just going to my applier. That apply to my pandas function, which is df train. So let's specify it here. df is going to be df train. So it's working. Perfect. It's finished. Now if I check it, this is going to be my label matrix. So if I have two functions, it's going to give us two rows. If I have three functions, it's going to give us three rows, right? So if I go back and I check it out, it's going to give us 2 by 2 rows, right? Two, right? And the one is for the question and negative one is the abstain. Some of them will be 0, but you fill them out, right? Perfect. That is it. Now we are done with this particular step. So what we have to do is that we want to be able to find and see if we can get the coverage, right? How many of our data sets is actually like that? So we can just do that with this option. Let's evaluate the performance. Simply just go with LF analysis that we imported. I'm just going to my L, going to be my L train. Then I can also specify my functions. So you're comparing the functions together. That is it, right? So then I can just summarize it. So LF summary. So this is going to analyze this particular one and give us our result here. So it's a function. So let's work it out. Hopefully I didn't make any mistake anyway. Perfect. So we had two functions, and this is the first one, this is the second one, and this is the polarity and this is the coverage. So based on the data set we have, the coverage was this, right? So the highest of them, the higher the coverage, the any of the functions with the highest coverage means that that function is doing more work, so we can actually rely on that particular function to do our labeling. So this one here had a higher coverage than this one here. The overlap is if there's an overlap between the questions or the patterns, right, and there are no conflicts. That is something very basic. So this is having the highest coverage, so in case I want to use a particular function, I will rely on the keyword lookup instead of the regular expression, because this is just for what, right? That is why it is low. Okay, so let's go back again. So we are done with it. Now let's move on and see how to use this particular function you have created to build our label model to be able to label the entire dataset. So there's also the concept of, let's say, majority vote model, right? Majority label vote. So this is useful in case you have a lot of different functions and you want to pick which of them is having the majority label. So we'll be talking about that later in the future, but let's work on the label itself, right? This is going to be the label model. So I'm just going to import it. So from snorkel.label.models import, what to be importing, what to be using, .label.labeling, not .model import. So you have the majority, you have the majority class, majority label voter, which you will not be using now. You have the label model, right? So we're using this one for the first one, right? This one you can use the same thing for the later in the future. Perfect. So let's build a model, which is going to be my simple model. So label model, which is going to be my label model class or estimator. Now specify cardinality. So you have cardinality. Let's give the cardinality to be 2, and let's specify the variables as true, right? These are basic stuff. Then now we can fit it on our dataset. Model, see what I did. Model.fit. I'm going to fit it on my L-train. Yep. Then you can also specify the number of epochs. So let's make it 500. And then you can also give the log frequency. So you can usually, something like this, right? So the training model, you are fitting it on this to train it, the number of epochs you want to go, the log frequency, be able to log some basic stuff there. Let's specify it as 100, and you also need to specify a seed to make it constant. So 1, 2, 3, right? So that is something very basic. Hopefully there are no mistakes anywhere. So I made a mistake here. So L-train should have at least 3 labeling functions, right? So the reason it's giving us this is because we have specified as 3, so we should at least have 3 labeling functions to make it cooler. So let's add another one to it. So let's add another function. I'm going to add another regular expression function here to make it look something simple. So let's change it. So anything that is having anything with question mark, right? With question mark is a question, right? So let's go there. So it contains question mark. This is going to be another. I made a mistake here. So with question mark, right? So this is going to be another function we are applying. Perfect. So let's add a particular function again. So in case you have any question or contribution, you can let us know. Contains question mark. If you have any question or contribution, let us also know, right? Within the comment section below, and also you can also check out the links below for some more. So as I said, if the labeling functions are 3, it's going to give us the label matrix of 3, right? This is just 2 because it was 2. So if I run it now, it's now going to be 3. Perfect. As you can see from here. Perfect. And now I can analyze it. So if I analyze it, it's now going to be 3. And this is 1%, right? Because most of them is giving us, this is having the highest coverage, because every question with a question mark is a question, right? Very cool. So in case you are looking at the average coverage, this question will give us better results, but you go with the first one. Okay, now let's build it again. Perfect. So it's working well. Now we have built our model. So in case I want to, we have our data set here, our unlabeled data set. If I go back with the df train, as we already saw, so this is not labeled, right? So in case I want to apply this new model we have built on it to label them, I just come back again and then try it out. So we apply our labeling model on our unlabeled dataset to make some predictions. So it's going to be very simple. So let's go to df train and let's call it as, let's say, labels, right? Which in this case is going to be like this. So my label model dot predict. Then in prediction, I'm going to specify what I want to predict. So I'll pass in my matrix or my label matrix. Then here I can also specify that, okay, type policy. As you can see, there is type policy here. I just use this type policy option here and specify that, okay, if there's any abstain, take it out, right? Abstain. So perfect, is going to label the entire stuff for us. Don't worry about the error. Now if I go back and I check it out, so df train, now it's going to label the entire stuff for us. Perfect. So these are, as you can see, some of them are negative, right? So the negative ones are the ones that are not, the negative ones are the ones that were abstained from it, but these are the questions one. But you can filter this one out. So let's see how to filter these ones out, right? So let's filter out the negative ones. So let's check it out, right? So in case I want to remove the abstain from it, I can just come back again. Very simple. So copy and paste the code. So just picking the labels. So this is the labels column here. That is the name of the new column we created, which was this column here, right? The labels column. And I'm just filtering any of them that is abstain, right? So that is how to do that. Perfect. So if I run it like that now, because there are negative ones here, but now if I run it again, there are not going to be any negative ones. So now I can just equate this one to a particular variable, and then you can just check it out. So that is one of the ways of working with it, right? So let's equate it to something. So df train to this, and now we can just do a simple, so let's import cborn as SNS, and let's check it out. So I just go back again, SNS dot count plot. Hopefully it's able to work, right? So this is going to be my X, is going to be my labels, and then the data is going to be this. Hopefully we get it well. Perfect. So there's only, it was able to give us only one label for the entire stuff, I think, because of how our data set is like, right? So that is one of the ways of working with it. Very, very simple approach, right? So I've seen how to be able to use a simple heuristic, a simple library, to be able to label our data set where it contains the word what, right? To know which one of them is a question and which of them is not a question, right? Okay, that is how to work with it. So I think the reason is that if I go back and I check these data set that we had, our initial data set, it looks like most of them are actually, knowledge is power, right? So this was filtered out, right? So these ones, because we filtered out, that's why we got only labels, right? But in case I don't want to filter the entire stuff, I want to maintain those ones only, right? The original one. I just go back again. If I check it out, you can see what I did. Go back and then check. This is the initial one. If I check it out, I'm going to see two, right? One is going to be for the labeled one, which is the questions, and this is going to be for the ones that are not questions, right? Very simple, very cool. So that is how to use this wonderful library to be able to do some simple labeling of your data. So the step number one is that you have your labeled data set, then you build some functions, right? Then you use a pandas LF applier to apply these labeling functions on a data set to build a label matrix. Then you evaluate to see which of them is good. then you build a label model and use to label your original dataset using Snorkel. Very simple, very interesting. So in case you have any question or contribution, you can just put it inside the comment section below, and see you in the next session. Stay blessed. So there are lots of things you can also do, but in the future I'll be trying to see how to use some other stuff. So there are also third party tools. So this is going to be the third party functions that you can use inside the labeling function. So let's try a simple example, right? So we can use Spacey, you can use test blob, any other particular library that you have, right? So in order to do that, just go with this option. To make it easy for us, I'll just copy the code, right? So this is something very simple. Now I'll explain it. So we can use this option here. So we have snorkel.labeling.lf.nlp. This is common because Spacey is very common. Everybody knows Spacey. So you can use this particular function to do any Spacey related tasks, or you can import Spacey itself, Spacey preprocessor. So apologies for the noise. So we are going to specify that, okay, I want to use Spacey processor to process this. This test field is the test field coming from our dataset here, this particular column. So this column here, it is called test field. It's called sentence, right? So that's what you're trying to use for our work. And then you're specifying that, okay, this is what we want to do. So I'm going to pass it into my labeling function. Then we are specifying that this labeling function is asking if it's a question. And as we really know, every question most of the time has a question mark. So if the text ends with a question mark, then it's a question. Or if it contains any of the 5 W's, so we are trying to use the part of speech tag and using tag to help us with that. So if it is an adverb, this is how we specify adverb in Spacey, then pick it up, right? So this is another way of trying to work with it. So you can actually apply this particular function to our task also, right? So I can just go back again, and then let's pick some of them. So I just put it back to specify it, right? So this is a third approach. So you can actually apply it again in our function here. This our function that we had here, right? So let me copy it and see first time. So I've seen how you can actually apply a preprocessor on our stuff to give us this result, right? So thank you for watching the tutorial. In case you have any question or contribution, you can just put it in the comment section below, and see you in the next session. Stay blessed. Bye.